Hi and welcome to CSS Units Part 1. We have already talked about the CSS units, one specific unit a lot, and that is the pixel unit. Now in this lecture and in the next one, in this video and in the next one, we are going to cover some of the most important units that you will be working with almost day to day. Now I'm not going to cover some of the outdated and irrelevant units, but I'm just going to focus on the most practical ones. First off, let's go ahead and create some markup. I'm going to say I'm going to create a section, and within the section I'm going to create an h1, and I'm going to say cascading style sheets. And I'm just going to create a paragraph. Very simple stuff. We have covered this many times over. Now let's dive into CSS, where all the magic happens, apparently. First, we are going to talk about absolute units. Absolute units. Now, these are called absolute units because their value is not relative. It's not flexible. So when you set it to whatever the absolute unit it is that you're using, it's always going to be that. It's not going to change. It's an absolute unit. The prime example of absolute units is pixels. So I'm going to say font size, let's set it to 75 pixels. Let's save that. So now this is 75 pixels. I'm going to reduce it to 45 because we are going to inspect this as well. Now if I go to inspect, let me get out of this and bring this up a little and bring this down. Let's select our h1. So now you can see that the font size for this h1 is 45 pixels. If we go to the computed tab, within the computed tab, it also says 45 pixels, and it tells you where this 45 pixels is actually coming from. It's coming from this CSS file. Now, this is an example of an absolute unit. Now, let's jump into relative units. Relative units are more flexible units. They are either flexible or they are dependent upon another unit. So the first unit that we are going to talk about in this relative unit category is the, let me just put it here, the M unit, M unit. So the M unit depends on the immediate parent's value for font size. Now, the reason that font size, I gave you an example of font size when we talked about pixels. I didn't say height and width or padding, margin, nothing. I just went straight to font size because font size is not as simple and it's not as superficial as you might think. Now, font size for the root element or the HTML element that we can see right here, this font size actually, it determines all the relative units. It provides a base for all the relative units. And in case the relative units, they do not have any parent. Now there is a lot more to this. I'm just going to break this down, what I just said, and make it easily digestible. Now, the M unit, again, I didn't finish what I was trying to say. Now, when it comes to font size, and you're using the font size of the HTML document or the root element, and let's say for your section, you're using a percentage sign, or you're using a viewport height, viewport width, they're always going to be considered in respect to their to the font size of their parent. Keep that in mind. It's always going to be the font size. So if you want to if you want to make anything responsive and your website responsive, you need to keep in mind that the HTML document font size, it provides the base for almost all the relative units. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's just dive into this a little bit more. Let's say we have this section. We do have this section, and I'm going to give it a font size of. Now we are talking about M units. So the M units, they specify, they take, it's a ratio of the font size of their parent. It doesn't matter if you use M units in height, in width, in padding, in margin. Even if you use M unit in padding, it's always going to revert back to font size. That's what I was saying. That's what I was trying to say. It's weird, but that's how CSS actually works. So the font size of the section is 10 pixel. We know that M unit, it takes a look at the font size of the immediate parent. What is the immediate parent? It is the section. So what is the element? The element is the P element. So P element's immediate parent is the section. Now, if I say font size 2M, what does that mean? It means 2 times the font size of the parent. So 2 times 10 pixel, it's going to be 20 pixels. So let's take a look at that. And there we go. As you can see, I have come to the computed tab, so we are just seeing the computed value, but the actual value is going to be 2M, but the computed value is 20 pixel. You might be asking, okay, where is this 20 pixel coming from? It's coming from the font size of the parent. Now, it doesn't matter if you use the M unit for your font size. Let's say you are setting a height or width for your paragraph. If you set the height to 10 EM or 10M, it means the height is going to be 200 pixels. There we go. Bottom right corner. That's what I meant by keeping in mind the font size of the HTML, keeping in mind the font size of the parent, immediate parents for relative units, because that is going to be taken as the base, even for other properties. So even if you have a width, that is going to be taken as the reference point. You can see here, if I come, the width is going to be 200 pixels. Let's take a look at padding. I'm going to say 0.5 EM. And this time, it has to be 10 pixel. 0.5 EM, it's 0.5 times 10 all around. So bottom margin, it's going to be 10. It's 0.5. I mean, it has to be 5 pixels, right? Because 10 pixels, let me just set it to 1. Padding is 20 pixels. 1 times, because this is 2 EM, that's why it's considering this. So let me just comment out this font size. And now you can see that it is actually considering the padding left. So whatever font size comes after, it's going to be they're going to be calculated according to that. That's why we saw a value. We can see a value of, we saw a value of 200 pixels for font size, for height and for width. The reason for that was we had a font size of 10 pixels, but then we changed that font size to 2 EM, and then whenever you have the latest font size for EM values, that is going to be taken as the reference point. That's why I don't usually recommend using M values, because they don't have a specific reference point. The reference point is the font size, but if whichever font size comes last. That's why I was a little bit shocked. Okay, like 0.5, 10 pixels, it is 5 pixels. Why do we see 10 pixels here? That's because of this font size, because we enlarged it twice. So I'm just going to comment this one. And now you can see 2 EM is 20 pixels. 10 times 20 pixels is 200 pixels. There we go. And 1 EM is 20 pixels. And 1 times 20 pixels is going to be 20 pixels on our sides. So even though this is padding, it's actually taking a look at the font size. Keep that in mind. This is why I don't usually recommend using the M unit. The reason for that is if you don't have any font size, let's say for your paragraph and for your section, then what is going to be the font, the font size? Then the font size of the HTML document will be taken into consideration. The font size of the HTML document is 16 pixels. Therefore, if we select our paragraph, you can see the font size of this is 16 pixels. And if we take a look at the height, 10 times 16 pixels, we see 160. Padding is going to be 16 because 1 EM is 1 times 16 pixels, which is going to be 16 pixel. So this is why this M unit is a little bit out of control. On the other hand, there is the REM unit, REM, REM unit. This is the unit that I'll be using a lot in our projects. The reason that I'm saying that this is the better unit is because it doesn't matter how many font sizes come before this. What is the latest font size? You don't have to worry about any of them. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is the font size of the HTML document. So I'm going to comment these ones out, and I'm going to say font size to rem. So what is the font size of the HTML document? It is 16 pixels. 2 times 16 pixels. So the font size has to be 20 pixels. You need to keep that in mind. So, 2 times 16, 32. I can't even do math. There we go. So it's 32. So it doesn't matter if the font size has already been declared on the paragraph. It doesn't matter if the parent of the paragraph has a font size. Rem is always going to consider reference root element, always, without any exceptions. But M, it considers the latest font size, whether that is within the parent or within the element itself. So font size is 2 rem. Now if I specify a height of 10 rem, now 10 rem is not going to be 200 pixels. It's going to be 160 pixels. Let's save that. There we go. So the height is 160 because rem says root element. You could say rem root element, and 10 times 16 is going to be 160. With this, our lecture comes to an end. In the next one, we are going to cover some more units.